If you're anything like almost every guy who's ever learned game, texting and online messaging are fucking frustrating, right? A lot of people give you rules. A lot of people say, do this, do that, do the other. But then when you see good texters text, they break the rules all the time. And so it's kind of like, I've heard this is true of law, right? You spend law school learning all the rules, and then you spend your entire career learning all the exceptions, because the only thing that seems to matter is the exceptions, right? And if it's the same thing with texting. If I give you formulaic, structured, do this, do that kind of rules, then you're going to mess up, and you're actually going to commit a lot of errors because you're being too rigid, or you're not being, correct to the situation, et cetera, et cetera. So instead of teaching you rules, at least as a starting point, I'm going to teach you principles, and I'm going to explain to you exactly why these 3 huge mistakes that guys make in texting actually convey low value. Because once you understand the why, once you understand why something's low value or why it doesn't work, now you understand when to apply the rule and when to violate the rule. And that's what's really, really important. So without too much further ado, I'm going to get into the 3 most common low value texting behaviors I see and why exactly it is they're low value. The first low value texting behavior I want to talk about is simply texting too much or too frequently. And this is something you may have heard of before, right? If you send really long text messages, if you multi-text, or if every single time she takes a day to respond to you and you take 30 seconds to respond to her, all of those tend to be low value needy behaviors. Notice I say tend to be, not are. It all depends on context, but they do tend to be low value. Why is this the case? Well, it shows a lot of eagerness. It shows a lot of desire for interaction, a desire for response, desire to keep the conversation going. And if that's the case, if you care too much about the interaction, if you care too much about a response, if you're sitting by your phone waiting for a text, it shows that this girl is very, very important to you in your life and you don't have a lot of other things going on. That's not how high value guys usually are in life. High value guys are usually busy doing lots of things. High value guys usually have their phones getting blown up by not just one girl, but multiple girls. High value guys usually have something they're passionate about, excited about, that they're doing in their day-to-day lives. And oftentimes, even if they do receive a text, they're in the middle of something, they put it back in their pocket and figure they'll respond to it later. I know I'm a terrible texter for this exact reason. Not terrible at texting, but terrible in terms of I frustrate people with my texting, because sometimes I will see the text, but I'm in the middle of something, I'll get back to them later, and then I forget. And then it goes half a day, 2 days, whatever, and people get frustrated with me. And in business isn't such a good behavior. With girls, it actually works very, very well because they end up being the ones chasing you. They end up wondering why it is you're not getting back to them. Similarly, if you're writing a lot in your text, it shows that you care a lot about getting it all in there, getting everything explained. It may mean that you're justifying yourself, explaining yourself, because you're saying something in a long way that could have been said in a short way. So the reason why this is a low value is not because more text is bad. There are some times when more text is just fine. The reason this is low value is not because you need to play games and try and wait 6 hours between every text. That actually fundamentally doesn't work. If you follow that as a rule, you're like, I'll wait 3 hours to text every single time. What happens when you start making plans? You're trying to wait 3 hours. You're going to break down your own plans. It's not going to work. It's not going to make sense. Also, when she's excited and is texting back a lot, you're going to kill the flow of the texting. So having a rote rule if you want to wait every single time is a bad idea. But having the general idea that you don't want to be responding every 30 seconds is a pretty good idea. Having the general idea that when you text a girl, your text should convey 1, maybe 2 messages at most, not be your entire life story, is a generally good idea. And again, there are exceptions. If you're explaining something that you have to in text, by all means do it. One little tip for this, by the way, if you have a long text to send, sometimes just do it as a voice message, or sometimes if the time is right, use it as an opportunity to pick up the phone and call, because that's a better method of conveying a lot in text. So in general, texting a lot, seeming to care a lot, seeming to be very invested in the text is a low value seeming behavior. It's not like you always have to wait 3 hours or you can never text more than 3 or 4 lines. That's crazy. There are definitely times to make those exceptions. But understand it's the overall vibe and the overall nature of the text. If every single text is super long, that's a problem. If every single text is immediate, that's a problem. If you're generally taking your time to get back to text, though, you have permission, you have the ability to respond immediately every once in a while without looking needy, because the overall nature and the overall vibe of the text has not been needy, all right? So these are not hard and fast rules, but they are very good principles to live by. And why? It's because the low value or needy thing that you are conveying, not the rule itself. The second super common texting mistake that I see is being too formal in your communication. See, texting is an informal type of communication. It's not the type of thing you send to your boss or to the government or whatever, right? In that case, you'd send an email or maybe even like a formal written letter, that sort of a thing, right? Texting is a lot more casual by its nature. So if you're being too formal in text, you're turning it into that situation, which is one, going to kill the emotions and kill the flirtation, but two, it's going to make it look like you care way too much. And again, looking like you care too much about the interaction, looking like this interaction is everything to you, tends to be very, very low value and tends to put you in a bad negotiating position in terms of determining the relationship. So what are some examples of this? One example is a girl writes you a text that has maybe several questions in it. And the guy who's very needy and cares a lot about the response that you're getting from the girl will actually answer every single question explicitly, which again leads to the previous problem of a very long text, but also leads to it seeming very thought out and very much like you're like walking on eggshells and trying to appease the girl on every little possible way. So that's one thing you want to avoid. The second one is it's really good to make things more casual and more informal. So instead of saying like, Roger, Shirley, my dad and I were sort of thinking that it's possible that, right? You just be like, we kind of thought. We kind of thought X, instead of like explaining every little pronoun, explaining every little deal in the sentence. Or a lot of times, instead of saying, I kind of think, you just be like, kind of thinking, whatever, right? And it's grammatically incorrect. It's not a real sentence. It's bad writing. You'd get an F on it in English, but in texting, it's totally fine because it's an informal communication. All that matters is getting the point across. And when the girl picks up the phone and looks at your text, it should look like you picked up the phone, saw whatever she wrote, and you just wrote back the first thing you thought. The content should be good, the message should be good, but it should appear that you didn't spend a lot of time typing. You just typed it the first way you thought and sent it off because you really didn't care or invest a lot. So you don't have to have periods at the end of your sentences. You definitely shouldn't have like semicolons. The only time you should use a semicolon is if you're doing emoticons, all right? Keep it simple and informal. It's a much better form of texting. And again, if it seems like you cared too much or tried too hard, that actually is explicitly low value and it's going to hurt you in the budding relationship. The third super common low value behavior that I see all the time is being insecure or reactive in the message of the text itself. And there are a lot of examples of this. One example is, let's say you're maybe starting to set plans with a girl and she hasn't gotten back to you for like a few minutes or even a few hours in some contexts where hours aren't a big deal. And you're like, did you get my message? What do you think? Are we still on? Double checking that indicates that you care way too much about this thing. Now, there is a difference. If it's getting close to the actual, if you have a scheduled time and you're getting close to the time of, that's different. Because now it's not needy and desperate. Now it's just like, hey, listen, I'm about to go there. I need this answer. And even if you were texting a friend, you would just be like, hey, what's the deal? I'm about to leave. So that's a different deal. But if you're double checking, are we on all the time? If you're double checking the details, are we okay? That's a bad idea. If you're checking how she responded to your previous text, are we okay? Was that rude? Did I offend you? That kind of stuff gets really, really bad. Okay. Number one, again, you're walking on eggshells and caring way too much. You should be of the position that most of the things you do in life are great, right? The vast majority of things you do are amazing and people love you for them. And that's been your habit of going through life. See, the way that you're texting her is conveying to her how people have responded to you your whole life. And if you're walking on eggshells and needy and trying to appease, you're indicating that you've been low value and you've had to be a people pleaser. You've had to bend over backwards your whole life. And that's not the behavior of an abundant alpha male type of a guy. Okay, so you don't want to be conveying those type of things. You don't want to be checking in all the time. Even beyond that, you don't want to be bringing to her attention the fact that you're thinking about the texting as a thing or thinking about how the texting is going. So you don't want to be like, was that a bad text, right? That sort of a thing, even if you think it was. Even if you think it was, don't bring it up. Be like, LOL, obviously just kidding. And then the next thing. And just get past it. You don't want to bring to her attention the fact that you're thinking about your text, the fact that you're considering it, the fact that you think there's technique to texting, right? Texting should essentially be a reflection of good internal psychology, which is like psychology that she likes you, plans are inevitable, and the texting is just a fun formality. That's the mentality you want to have. As soon as you start thinking about being analytical in your texting, you're already hurting yourself. But as soon as you mention to her being analytical in your texting, you are really in trouble. Okay. So again, it's informal, it's fun, and it comes from the viewpoint that basically you're a high value guy, she already likes you, and it's assumed you're going to get together, and everything is just manifesting, and it's a necessary formality to make that underlying eventuality come to pass. That's it. That's the whole idea. If you have that mentality, that's going to really help you. And actually, a weird kind of mental trick you can do for yourself in text is to assume that texting really doesn't matter that much. Now, we all know it does. We all know that sending the wrong text at the wrong time can ruin a perfectly good interaction. We all know it, but I want you to kind of psychologically forget it. I want you to psychologically, you can go one of two ways. Either assume that the girl likes you no matter what and the texting is just a formality, or assume that, you know what, the girls that are not in your immediate vicinity you're not talking to are low priority, and if they come to fruition, you have a date with them, that's great. If they don't, you're completely fine with it. You've completely accepted it. One way or another, as long as you're not over-investing in the text and you're not constantly checking your phone, you're not worrying about the outcome of the text. One way or another, you want to do proper texting because it's proper texting, but not because you care about the results. So whether you can either convince yourself, you know what, texting isn't a big part of it. If she likes me enough, she's going to come out anyway, and therefore I don't give a damn. You know what? If she likes me enough, it's going to work, and if she doesn't, it wasn't meant to be. Or if you want to say, you know what, like I care about what's going on in my life right now. Anybody that's just in my phone, that's a low priority thing. It's a bonus round. If it happens, it's great. That's another mentality. One way or another, a mentality where texting is a lighthearted, fun piece of the puzzle that's not the biggest piece, that's going to help you tremendously because that's going to get across the right psychology. It's going to get across a lot of the right behaviors, and it's mimicking the way high value guys text, which is they don't really care as much about the text. They're not being rude. They're not following some rule to create scarcity that isn't there. They just simply, it's not their number one priority. Okay, and that's what you want to get to with all of this. All right, so this is obviously just a primer on texting. There are, like I said, there are as many exceptions as there are rules, and that's why I don't teach rules. I teach principles first. We can get into all those exceptions, and we'll definitely go a lot deeper on texting in the very near future. But I want you to understand that every single high-value good behavior in texting, and also every single low-value behavior in texting, it's not good or bad on its face. It's not good or bad always in a vacuum by rule. It's good or bad by context and because of what it's conveying, where it's coming from within the interaction, right? And that's why rote rules or memorize this principle doesn't tend to work very well. But being a high-value guy and texting accordingly tends to work really well, even if you do make some technical mistakes, all right? So I want to get this foundation of understanding what low-value behaviors are, understanding where they come from, understanding what a high-value mentality in text is, as a baseline for anything else we discuss in texting going forward. So I hope you enjoyed the content. I know some of that in terms of the actual principles being put across may be review for some of you. They may be new for some others of you. Regardless of if you've heard them before as rules, I want you to understand this distinction that they are principles, not rules, and that it depends where it's coming from. Because if you follow these things as rules and you think they're black and white, you're going to create just as many text problems as you're solving. So with everything you do in text and everything you do in game, and honestly everything you do in life, do it, understand it, and do it for the right reasons. Do it instead of by memorization, do it with an understanding of the principles involved. And that's when you're going to get to really elite levels. And that's when you're going to be able to figure out those new situations that come up. Because life is unpredictable, texting is unpredictable. You need a system that's going to allow you to adjust in the right way, as well as just having the right answers up front. So I hope you like that. Stay tuned. Talk to you next time. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to be doing a special event on the single most important subject in all of game. And that subject is value. Value Masterclass is a special 2-day live online event where I'm going to go deeper on the subject of value than I ever have before. Things like, what is value anyway? How do women perceive value? Why do they care about it? How can you convey that value? And even beyond that, how can you go beyond showing value to actually being a man of value deep down? For more information and to sign up, click the link below. Hopefully we'll see you there, and thanks for watching.